the pharaohs, the Pharaoh, the most arrogant rulers this planet has ever seen. For thousands and thousands of years, the Pharaoh ruled Egypt with an iron fist. They called themselves gods. They enslaved entire nations. They built pyramids on the broken backs of millions. And they believed no power on this earth could ever take Egypt away from them. But they were wrong. Because one man sitting thousands of miles away in a small city called Medina was about to snatch the land of Pharaoh from the most powerful empire on earth, and he was going to do it forever. That man was Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph of Islam. And this is the story of how he destroyed the legacy of Pharaoh once and for all. But before we get into the conquest, you need to understand something. Umar did not even want to attack Egypt, and he had a very serious reason. Just a short while before anyone even mentioned Egypt, one of the biggest catastrophes in Islamic history struck the Muslim army. A deadly plague, the plague of Amwas, swept through the Muslim forces like a wildfire that nobody could stop. 25,000 soldiers dead, gone, wiped out in a matter of weeks. And it was not just ordinary soldiers. The greatest generals of Islam, absolute legends like Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah and Mu'adh ibn Jabal, all of them were killed by this plague. The entire military leadership was destroyed. Caliph Umar rushed from Medina to meet the remaining forces and hold things together. And it was there that he came face to face with the new commander of the Muslim army, a man named Amr ibn al-As. Now, Amr ibn al-As was different from every other general. Before he accepted Islam, he was one of the richest businessmen in all of Mecca. And because of his trade routes, he used to travel to Egypt constantly. He knew every road. He knew every city. He knew exactly how the Egyptians thought. And most importantly, he knew their weaknesses. So right there, standing in front of the Caliph, Amr made his pitch. He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, forget about recovering. Forget about sitting and waiting. This is our moment. We need to march straight into the land of Pharaoh and take it. But Umar looked at him and said, are you serious? We just lost 25,000 soldiers. Our army is shattered. We have barely enough men to defend ourselves. And you want to invade Egypt? The land that even the pharaohs could not lose for 3,000 years? And what if the Persian Empire attacks us from behind while our forces are stuck in Egypt? But Amr ibn al-As did not flinch. He stood his ground like a mountain. He said, I know these people. I have walked their streets. I have sat in their markets. Trust me, the people of Egypt cannot stand against the army of Islam. This is the time to strike. After days of debate, Umar finally gave in, but with one condition. He said, fine, march toward Egypt. But if I change my mind and send you a letter, you will turn your entire army around and come back. No questions asked. Amr agreed. He gathered his men, just 4,000 soldiers, and began marching toward the land of the pharaohs. Now picture this scene. On one side, Amr ibn al-As is marching toward Egypt with 4,000 men. On the other side, Caliph Umar is heading back to Medina. And the entire journey home, Umar cannot stop thinking. The risks are enormous. The army is tiny. Egypt has been unconquerable for centuries. What if this ends in total disaster? The moment Umar reached Medina, he called an emergency council. He gathered every senior companion, Uthman ibn Affan and all the others, and asked them one simple question. Should we let Amr continue to Egypt, or should we call him back? One by one, every single companion gave the same answer. Call him back. It is too dangerous. Umar sat down. He picked up his pen and he wrote a letter that would either change history or save his army from destruction. The letter said, "The moment you receive this, turn around and bring your entire army back to Medina. But if you have already crossed the border into Egypt, then put your trust in Allah and keep moving forward." A messenger was sent racing across the desert at full speed. Now here comes the part of this story that gives me chills every single time. There are two versions of what happened next. In the first version, by the time the messenger reached Amr, the Muslims had already crossed into Egypt. Simple. The letter was irrelevant. But the second version is legendary. In this version, when the messenger arrived, the Muslim army had not yet crossed the Egyptian border. They were close, very close, but they were still outside. The moment Umar ibn al-As saw that messenger riding toward him at full speed, he immediately understood. He knew exactly what that letter said. Umar was calling them back. So what did the general do? He did not open the letter. Instead, he walked up to the messenger, smiled and said, "Brother, you look exhausted. Come, sit down. Let me get you some food. Rest for a while. You have traveled a long way." While the messenger was eating and resting, Amr quietly ordered his army, "Keep marching. Do not stop. Move faster." And the moment the Muslim army crossed the border into Egypt, only then did Amr ibn al-As open the letter. He read it, he smiled, and he said, "Well, it seems we have already entered Egypt. There is no going back now. We move forward in the name of Allah." This was it. The invasion of the land of Pharaoh had officially begun. Amr pushed his forces deeper and deeper into Egyptian territory. Town after town fell to the Muslims, and finally they arrived at the most important target, the capital of Egypt, the city that we today know as Cairo. Now understand what the city was. This was not some ordinary town. This was one of the most heavily fortified, most powerful cities on the entire planet. For over 600 years, the Roman Empire had controlled this city. Nobody, no army, no king, no empire had been able to take it. The legacy of Pharaoh lived on through these Roman walls. Different rulers, same arrogance. The Muslims set up their camps right in front of the city and prepared for battle. When the Romans inside saw this tiny army outside their gates, they decided to play a psychological game. They brought out everyone, soldiers, women, children, old men, and lined them up along the walls. Thousands upon thousands of faces staring down at the Muslims. The message was clear. Look at our numbers, be afraid. But who were they trying to scare? The followers of the man who stood against the Pharaoh himself? The followers of Musa, of Muhammad, of Umar? I do not think so. Amr sent a messenger straight into the Roman camp, and this messenger looked the Romans dead in the eye and delivered a message that shook them to their core. He said, "Do you even know who you are dealing with? We just crushed your emperor Heraclius. We took his greatest lands. We humiliated his greatest armies. So tell me, what exactly are you going to do to us?" Silence. Even their governor Cyrus admitted, he speaks the truth. Amr launched a full attack, but 4,000 men against those massive walls, it was not enough. For 7 brutal months, the Muslims tried and failed. They could not break through. Finally, Amr swallowed his pride and sent word to Umar, "I need more men." Umar had expected this. He immediately dispatched 12,000 reinforcements led by one of the greatest companions of the Prophet, Zubair ibn al-Awwam. a warrior so respected that Umar would later nominate him as one of the 6 candidates to become the next Caliph. Now, with 16,000 soldiers, the Muslims devised a genius battle plan straight from the playbook of Khalid ibn al-Walid. The next morning, the Romans marched out of their fortress. The 2 armies clashed, swords rang, arrows flew, and then the Muslims began retreating slowly, step by step. It looked like they were losing. It looked like the Romans were about to win. But at that exact moment, a second Muslim force appeared behind the Roman army. They had been waiting, hiding, watching. Amr gave the signal. Both Muslim forces attacked simultaneously. The Romans were completely surrounded, trapped from every direction, and then they were crushed. But still, even after this devastating defeat, the Muslims could not get inside the city. Those walls were just too strong. Until one night, Zubayr ibn al-Awwam decided he had had enough. Under the cover of darkness, he led a small team of fighters over the walls, snuck into the city, and threw the gates wide open. The Muslim army charged in. The capital of Pharaoh's land, the city that had stood unconquered for 6 centuries, had fallen to the soldiers of Islam. The Roman governor fled to Alexandria, the last Roman stronghold in Egypt. From there, he sent Amr a desperate message: "I will surrender all of Egypt." But when Emperor Heraclius heard about this, he exploded with rage. He sent orders to every Roman soldier in Egypt: ignore the governor, fight to the death. So Amr marched toward Alexandria. And before they left, something beautiful happened. As the Muslims were packing their camps, Amr went to take down his tent. But inside, a pigeon had built a nest with baby chicks. The fierce general, the conqueror of Egypt, left his tent standing, just so a pigeon's family would not be disturbed. Every Muslim after him also left that tent untouched. People began settling around it. In Arabic, a tent is called fustat. That settlement grew and eventually became what we now call Cairo, the capital of Egypt, named after a pigeon's nest. The Muslims reached Alexandria and were stunned. This was a city built by Alexander the Great himself, bigger than Damascus, bigger than Madain, the most fortified city Umar's caliphate had ever faced. For 6 months, every attack failed. The walls held. The Romans sent a massive fleet to reinforce the city. It truly seemed like this was the end. The land of Pharaoh would never fully fall. But then, a twist that nobody could have predicted. Back in Constantinople, Emperor Heraclius, the last powerful Roman emperor, died after 30 years of rule. His son took the throne, but within days, the boy's stepmother murdered him and placed her own son as emperor. The Roman generals erupted in fury. A civil war ripped the entire empire apart. The fleet heading to Egypt was forced to turn back. When the chaos ended, the new Roman emperor was 11 years old. 11 years old. Against Umar ibn al-Khattab, Umar had been watching from Medina. He knew this was the moment. He wrote a letter and sent it racing to Egypt. When Amr opened it, the order was simple: gather every soldier. Read this letter to all of them now. Amr assembled the entire army. He opened the letter and read Umar's words. O Muslims, what has happened to you? You have been fighting for 2 years and still have not taken Egypt. I fear you have abandoned the ways of the Prophet and the Quran. I fear you have fallen in love with this world, just like the people of Fir'aun before you. Remember, Allah never helps a nation that has lost its path. So I am sending you reinforcements. Now rise, fix your horses, draw your swords, and fight one final battle so that the land of Fir'aun may belong to Islam forever. When those words echoed across the camp, something changed inside every single soldier. They grabbed their weapons, they mounted their horses, and they charged at Alexandria with a fury the Romans had never seen. The walls crumbled, the towers fell, the gates shattered, the Muslims poured into the greatest city the Roman Empire had ever held in Egypt. Governor Cyrus watched the destruction with his own eyes. He understood. An 11-year-old emperor was no match for Umar ibn al-Khattab. He picked up his pen and signed the surrender of all of Egypt. The land of the pharaohs, the land of Pharaoh, the land that had stood for thousands of years, was now under the flag of Islam forever. Amr sent a messenger sprinting to Medina. When Umar heard the news in Masjid al-Nabawi, he fell into prostration. He thanked Allah with tears in his eyes. Then he gathered all of Medina and told them the story. He asked the messenger, "Why did you go to the mosque instead of my house?" The messenger said, "I thought you might be sleeping." Umar replied, "If the Caliph sleeps during the day, who will run this ummah?" After the conquest, something strange happened. The locals told Amr, "Every year the Nile dries up. To make it flow again, we sacrifice a young virgin girl by throwing her into the river. You must do the same." The Muslims were horrified. But weeks later, the Nile did begin to dry. Some people panicked. Amr wrote to Umar asking what to do. Umar's reply was iconic. He said, "We came to this world to destroy these superstitions, not to follow them." He sent a note to be thrown into the Nile. It read, "O Nile, if you flow by your own will, then stop. We have no need for you. But if you flow by the will of Allah, then we ask Him to make your waters flow again." Shortly after, the Nile flooded with more water than anyone had ever seen. The pharaohs had enslaved people to control the Nile. Umar controlled it with faith. And speaking of justice, after Egypt was conquered, the son of Amr ibn al-As beat an ordinary Egyptian citizen with a stick. He wanted to show dominance. He wanted to say, "We are your new masters." That Egyptian traveled all the way from Egypt to Medina. He stood before Umar and told him everything. Umar summoned Amr and his son to Medina. When they arrived, the Egyptian was sitting right next to the Caliph. Umar handed his stick to the Egyptian and said, "Strike the son of Amr exactly the way he struck you." After the Egyptian struck the son, Umar said, "Now strike his father too," because it was his father's power that gave his son the arrogance to hit you. The Egyptian chose not to strike Amr, but what Umar said next became the most legendary sentence in all of Islamic governance. He looked at Amr ibn al-As and said, "Since when have you enslaved people whose mothers gave birth to them free?" This was the difference between Pharaoh and Umar. Pharaoh enslaved nations. Umar freed them. Pharaoh called himself God. Umar fell into prostration before the real God. Pharaoh built his legacy on the backs of the oppressed. Umar built his legacy on justice. And that is why thousands of years of Pharaoh's rule could not survive. But the legacy of Umar ibn al-Khattab lives on to this very day. But the story is far from over. Right after the conquest of Egypt, the Persian emperor was secretly gathering a massive army, preparing to launch one final devastating attack on the Muslims. That story is coming next. So hit that subscribe button because you do not want to miss it.